Did you know that you can learn one single technique that will make switchbacks easy? Lots of riders struggle getting their bikes to make tight corners, and today we're going to learn the one technique that's going to help unlock switchbacks for you. My name is Aaron. Welcome to Super Rider. This is where we dissect bike skills. We break them down so that you can pick them up even faster. In order to demonstrate the switchback technique and to challenge myself a bit, I'm going to make the hardest possible setup for switchbacks here in the warehouse. It's going to be flat. Then there's not going to be enough room for my bike, and then it's going to be a full 180-degree turn back down. I can't think of anything harder to do. So if this works here in the warehouse, it will certainly work for you on the trail. Like I said earlier, we dissect bike skills here and build them from the ground up. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to take the switchback setup and push it out of the way and start working on flat ground to build this technique. Here are 3 quick bike setup things that will help you learn this technique faster. Number 1, push your seat down and out of the way. Number 2, if possible, lock out your suspension. And number 3, if you've got some flat pedals, this might be a good time to put them on. The reason why we would run flat pedals is that we're going to be doing a lot of turning and getting the bike off balance, and you don't want to be locked into your bike as it's turning side to side. It's easier just to be on flat pedals and put your foot down if you run out of balance. We can start warming up our turning and switchback skills by riding in a tighter and tighter circle. Eventually it'll get too tight to turn the bike, and that's exactly where this technique comes in. The technique we're going to learn today is the pivot on the front wheel. This allows us to lift our back wheel off the ground and move it to a position that's going to line up the bike to make the corner so much easier. Let's get started with the basics. Your front wheel pivot happens when you move your body weight over the front wheel. That allows the back wheel to lift up so that we can move it where we want it to go. The first thing we need to do is get comfortable moving our body weight to the front of the bike. The easiest way to do that is a trick called the endo. An endo is when you roll along slowly, grab a little bit of front brake while you move your body weight forward, and it lifts the back wheel off the ground. You can start super mellow with this one and just get the back wheel a little bit off the ground to get comfortable in that position. I realize it's kind of scary to go up over the front wheel, but you'll realize quickly as you do this how far you can actually go and still stay in control. You don't have to go crazy on this one. We only need the back wheel to lift off the ground an inch or two to get the job done. But it is helpful to practice this just so that you get the confidence to know you're not going to flip over the bars if your back wheel just comes a few inches off the ground. One technique that helps me get my back wheel off the ground other than my front brake is a pedal motion called the scoop. So what I'm doing is I'm pushing down, back, and up on the pedals to put pressure on the back wheel to lift it off the ground. This is something that you can practice on flat ground without your front brake. Just roll along and practice that scooping motion with your pedals, and you'll see your back wheel come off the ground. Once you're feeling confident getting that back wheel off the ground, it's time to start moving it. This is the secret sauce of riding switchbacks. So we're going to start small and then we'll start pushing it a bit. To get that back wheel moving, we're going to go into an endo, but add a slight twist. We're going to twist our front wheel away from our front foot as we go into the endo. As we're easing on that front brake, you just give it a little bit of a twist, and that sets us up to get that back wheel moving. If you can track stand, you'll notice that this is the exact same position with your front wheel turned away from your front foot that you use when you track stand. So you could actually practice this from that same track stand position if you've got those locked in. Once you've twisted your front wheel and grabbed that front brake, we're going to use that scooping pedal motion to lift the back wheel up off the ground. Then you're going to use your back foot to push your back wheel around so that your wheels line up straight again. That's the front wheel pivot. Now, if you're really struggling with this and you can't get the back wheel to move at all, it's probably because you're not far enough over the front of the bike. If you're in the middle of the bike or even over the back wheel, it's not going to unweight this back wheel and it's not going to let it move. So you need to make sure that you're on the front of the bike so that this back wheel can swing freely. And by directing it with your back foot, you're going to push it into place. To begin your practice here, just focus on getting a couple degrees movement at a time before you start adding more and more to it. If you want to get that back wheel to move even farther, there's 2 extra things that you can do. Number 1, you can twist your front wheel even tighter, or number 2, you can lift your back wheel a bit higher. That gives it a little bit more time to kind of fall into place. Those 2 things will help you get the maximum out of your rotation. Okay, let's test this all out. Before we start taking it to switchbacks, let's put something on the ground that simulates a corner and try to go as tight around it as we possibly can.
At this point, you might be thinking, that's great, Aaron, but switchbacks go in 2 different directions and you only showed us one. What I would recommend is that you first learn how to move it with your back foot pushing on the rear wheel, because not only are you gonna get confident with it, but while you're perfecting that technique, you're gonna get really good at getting your body weight over this front wheel, which is sort of the secret sauce of this technique. Once you've got that figured out, we can start working on moving it the opposite direction. And the drill that I like to use when I'm moving my back wheel in the opposite direction is something called clocks. So clocks you can do in either direction. What you do is you grab your front brake and you pivot your back wheel around the front wheel. And first you go in one direction, your strong direction, then try going the opposite direction. And that is gonna help you really lock in pivoting on your front wheel in both directions.
I think it's time to put this technique to the test. We're gonna move the boxes back into place for our crazy hard switchback setup. Let's see if I can get the job done. Oof, 180 on a downhill like this is really, really tight. See how I used 2 pivots to get the job done because I couldn't get it done in one on the first try? That's okay because I still made the corner. I just put 2 pivots together and I sort of readjusted my body halfway. Totally fine to do. But of course, you know I'm not happy with that. I've got to get it done in one. Let's do it. Since we've got this switchback setup built up, let's see if I can go up it as well. Now, usually I would use a back wheel pivot in that scenario, but we're gonna cover that on the next video. Either way, both the front and back wheel pivots can be incredibly useful on the trail. We've successfully navigated one of the craziest switchback setups of all time using one technique that was relatively easy to learn. Remember that practice makes progress, so when you're working on this move, just try to get a couple degrees at a time and slowly build your consistency and your confidence with it. If this video was helpful for you, consider sharing it with another person that you ride with. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so you can see the next tutorial that I'll make that will help you with your riding. If you can't wait that long, go check out this playlist right here. This is where all the good stuff is. Have fun.